Hi, good morning. Well, it's morning for me. Good afternoon, good evening. Mrs. Smith is going to teach you about the Aztecs today. We are going to start our lesson by understanding that I'm teaching you from printouts that I have, from doodle notes that I've made, from books that Miss Fleming has pulled off of the library shelf that are going to help us understand, but we need to start with some geography. Where were the Aztecs? Where did they live? And so we need to see right here that the Aztecs lived on the isthmus part of Mexico, which means there was Gulf of Mexico on one side and Pacific Ocean on the other. And the skinny in between part, here's maybe another way that you can see it. Here's Mexico, and Mexico is kind of long, and then it gets very skinny down at the bottom. And the Aztecs lived from coast to coast, and their huge, big city, their capital city was Tenochtitlan. And Tenochtitlan was built as an island on the middle of a lake. So let's get into our online textbook, and I'm going to have to move my body over here. You can still see me. And listen as Miss Smith reads. The Aztecs ruled the region next. They settled in central Mexico in about 1300. Their impressive capital city was Tenochtitlan. Mexico City occupies the site where it once stood. Tenochtitlan was on an island in the middle of a lake. Causeways connected it to the mainland. Causeways are like skinny little rivers where you could sail your boats. The Aztecs had a complex social and religious system. They conquered many of their neighbors and made slaves of captured soldiers. The Aztec emperor collected property taxes, money from people as well. Priests performed rituals to win the favor of their gods. So Aztecs were polytheistic. They believed in many gods and goddesses. And so they would do rituals so that the gods would give them things like lots of rain so the crops would grow. Maybe they'd do a ritual to make the rain fall. The Aztecs were also skilled farmers. They built up land in the lake to form small islands called chinampas, which they used to grow crops. Those were floating gardens. They would tie a raft to the bottom of the lake, and then on the raft, they would pile dirt on top of it and then plant their crops basically on a raft. So let's talk about the conquistadors, the people that came in. The Spanish conquistadors. Aztecs had been living in central Mexico for hundreds of years, and the Spaniards set sail over from Europe and landed on the coast of Mexico. And the lead conquistador was Hernan Cortez. And Hernan Cortez had defeated the Aztecs. Okay, but he only had a few hundred men. How could a few hundred Spanish conquistadors defeat an entire civilization of hundreds of thousands of people? Okay, it comes down to this. They had guns, they had armor. I'm talking about the conquistadors. They had guns, they had armor, and secretly, whether they knew it or not, we're not sure, secretly they spread smallpox. And the Aztec did not have any immunity to smallpox. So let's make sure this is what the book says. Spanish guns and armor were better weapons than the Aztec spears. Another major factor was the introduction of European diseases. Diseases such as smallpox didn't exist in the Americas until Europeans unknowingly brought them. Native Americans had no resistance to the diseases, which killed thousands. Cortez also took advantage of the anger of other indigenous groups who resented Aztec rule. And so he gathered up all of the enemies of the Aztecs to fight with the conquistadors. Last but not least, one of the things you need to know is that a Spaniard from Spain might have had skin and hair and eyes that were very different color from an indigenous Aztec who lives in Mexico, who might have had darker skin and darker hair and darker eyes. And so when the conquistadors arrived, the Aztecs kind of thought like, wow, we've never seen anyone who has light skin or red hair or blue eyes. And the Aztecs initially treated Hernan Cortez like he was a god. And so they gave him a beautiful tour of the city of Tenochtitlan. And secretly, Hernan Cortez was plotting the whole time oh, well, I'm just going to kill the emperor and I'm going to take over here. So that kind of played into the conquistador situation. Let me show you really quick this really cool picture. I got to move my body. Right here is Tenochtitlan, and temples were built at the top of the pyramids on the city. Let me show you a little bit about the temples. Maybe you need to just see this picture right here. The religious life in Aztec culture. You can kind of see the cutout of what the temple might have looked like. And up at the top, on this side, up at the top on the temples were shrines to the specific gods and goddesses. I really like this that talks about religious life, but mainly I love this image because it comes from Miss Fleming's book, Aztec, Inca, and Maya. It comes from Miss Fleming's book, and it's kind of a cutout of these beautiful temples that the Aztecs made. Next, we're going to talk about the flag of Mexico. We're going to talk about the flag of Mexico. Mexico has a red, white, and green flag, but let's talk about that guy in the middle. Like, what's happening right here in the middle? Listen to the story, please. According to the story, a Native American tribe searched for 200 years in the Valley of Mexico looking for a suitable location to build their home city. The god of war instructed them to build a city at the location where they would find an eagle perched on a rock in the middle of a lake, holding a freshly killed snake. And eventually they came to the lake where they would eventually build what is now Tenochtitlan, which is now Mexico City. Of course, no one knows if that legend's really true, but that's maybe why you have this Aztec symbol on the middle of the flag of Mexico. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. And let's just focus right here on what Mrs. Smith has to say next. So here's my desktop background. It's one of the beautiful temples. So a lot about the Aztec menu, the food that they ate. We might know this as corn, but we could call it maize as well. It was first cultivated in Mesoamerica, which means central Mexico. And it was so important because corn could be made into, ground into flour and made into tortillas and made into all different types of food. But then chocolate lovers around the world could thank the Aztecs for introducing. Sometimes people say cacao and sometimes people say cocoa, but the beans are actually what makes chocolate. You add a lot of sugar to make it chocolate, but the beans themselves, the cocoa beans, are actually very bitter before they're processed and made into chocolate. So this is just a picture of the maize, of the corn, and you can see, here's what Mrs. Smith wrote on her doodle notes about agriculture and farming. I wrote that cocoa was used to make chocolate, and corn, which is maize, could make tortillas and tamales. Over here on the other side, you can see where Mrs. Smith wrote on her doodle notes about the eagle with the snake in his mouth on top of a cactus. And what I wrote was, this is the symbol of the flag of Mexico, but the Aztecs saw this and thought, oh, it's a sign from our gods. This is where we need to build our city. Last but not least, we're going to talk about human sacrifices, which maybe is like not the best thing to talk about at the end of a big lesson, but there's some super cool things that Miss Fleming pulled for me. The first is, listen, sacrifice was common to Mesoamerican culture. Some myths or stories that give reasons for the killing. I know that it's just, this book is called Mesoamerican Myths. It's from Miss Fleming's library, but check this out. It's like a cartoon version of someone like killing someone else and stabbing his heart out. It's so gross. But that was totally what happened in Aztec culture. The religion was polytheistic. They believed in many different gods and goddesses. So the priests in the Aztec culture would take human sacrifices and cut out their hearts. I'm sorry, this is gross. Cut out their hearts and then offer their hearts as like a gift to the gods. And this one is Miss Fleming's book. It's called Hernan Cortez, The Life of a Spanish Conquistador. And look, here's that guy, Hernan Cortez, who again was the Spanish conquistador who conquered the Aztecs. But on this page, it says, death by sacrifice was a holy act for the Aztecs. Their priests killed captives by cutting out their hearts.
Hello,
oh
good
dear.
morning, Fort Falcons. This is Miss Spencer. If you were out for any length of time, if I sent you home and you're returning today and I've not yet seen or talked with you, please come to the nurses clinic by the library. Thank you very much.
So anyway, I'm gonna show it to you, and it's gonna look kind of gross, but it's only a cartoon version. And here's what you can see it there at the top of the temple, and literally someone is having their heart cut out. And I know that that's kind of gross, but it's in this book that's in our library, so I guess I can show it to you. I got one more thing to show you, and gosh, unfortunately, it's also about human sacrifice. The most common form of sacrifice among the Aztecs was to stretch the victim over a sacrificial stone. 5 priests took part. 4 of them held the limbs, and 1 cut out the heart. Ugh, gross. But you can see it. It's kind of disgusting. So it's very clear that Aztec culture was like especially violent, but that's just because the Aztec priests believed that the human sacrifice was what was needed to please the gods in their polytheistic society. Right over here. This is what Miss Smith wrote on her notes. I put this big old skull and crossbones because, ew, gross. Human sacrifice was important because it kept the gods happy. And then remember that word polytheistic is what means they believed in many gods and goddesses. So the last thing that you'll need to do on your doodle notes is you'll need to write about the ball game that the Aztecs played that's called Tlachtli. And what I want you to do is go back and watch the YouTube article. It's from a cartoon called YouTube article. I meant video. It's from a movie that's called The Road to El Dorado, and it's about how some Europeans are trying to dupe the Aztecs, and then they end up having to play this ball game. But you'll notice that you don't get to use your hands in the ball game. You have to use your elbows and your shoulders and your legs. And oftentimes, the people that would lose at the ball game, they would be killed. So high stakes. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed learning all about the Aztecs. I know it got kind of dark there at the end when we started talking about human sacrifice and stuff, but at least you've learned a lot. Let me know if you have any questions. I hope you have a great day.